Greetings and welcome to Western Recaps. Today, I will be going over a 1993 film called The Ballad of Little Joe. Spoilers ahead, the movie is a musical on the subject of identity. It is the story of a young woman named Josephine Monahan, who is forced to leave her house and ultimately her hometown after she bears a son outside of wedlock. Josephine leaves her son with her sister. On the way, she decides to assist a traveling salesman who subsequently tries to make money by offering her two soldiers seeking a woman for a night. Josephine escapes, scars her face, and begins to dress as a man, thus becoming Joe. She reaches Ruby City, and at a mining camp, Joe meets Percy, who takes her under his wing. Percy recommends Joe for a job at the stable and teaches her about the tricks of the trade in the frontier. However, Percy has a deep suspicion of women, which he later demonstrates by slashing the face of a prostitute who refuses to give him his desired pleasure. Joe no longer feels safe with Percy, so she accepts to be a shepherd and heads for the mountains. After returning in the spring, Percy gives Joe a letter for her that he received months earlier. The letter is from Joe's sister, and Percy, having opened it, now knows that Joe is a woman. He is furious at being made a fool or by a woman, and that too with a suspicious character, referring to the mention of her son in the letter. He attacks and tries to defile Joe, but she draws her gun and forces him to stop. Since he's looked down upon by the townspeople since the incident with the prostitute, Percy promises Joe he will not share her secret if she finances his journey out of the territory. She agrees after swearing to him that she will find him and kill him if he lets a word out. For 5 years, she works as a shepherd, braving the deadly winters alone to the worry of her employer, Frank Badger, who has taken a liking to the young man he nicknames Little Joe. When Joe has enough money saved, she quits Badger and buys her own homestead. While frequently viewed as peculiar, Joe is clearly educated and earns the respect of the people in Ruby City and the surrounding territory. A local girl, Mary, has her eye on Joe. Blind to the truth, most hope the two will get married. However, Mary ends up courting her cousin, Lucas Brown, soon after Joe returns from her first winter as a sheep herder. One day in town, Joe comes across a mob about to hang a Chinese laborer for trying to take their jobs. Joe intervenes, and Badger insists the chairman, Tinman Wong, go to live with Joe to help with Joe. Tinman accompanies Joe to the homestead and takes on the duties of cook and housekeeper. Though he seems slow-witted, Joe is not happy at having company forced upon her and is afraid he will discover she is not a man. She keeps as much distance as possible, but Tinman easily discovers the truth about Joe and, in doing so, reveals he is far more intelligent than he has pretended to be. He, too, has been masquerading for his own safety. Joe drops her guard, and the two begin a love affair. A feud begins to brew between the sheep herders and the cattlemen, who are moving into the territory. The Western Cattle Company wants to buy up all the land in the area, and they kill anyone who does not comply. One by one, the sheep herders give in or are murdered by masked gunmen. Joe has witnessed the brutal murders of too many of her friends, and the violence that will be necessary to win this kind of fight goes against her gentle nature. This is a masculine quality that goes beyond her abilities to pass. Hence, Joe dons a dress once again in a feeble effort to step back into a more traditionally feminine role. Tinman argues that it will be impossible for her to go back to being the society woman, urging her to keep the homestead and stand against the cattlemen in the upcoming election. Joe is not swayed and meets with the representative from the cattle company, Henry Gray, to tell him what she will sell. Tinman falls ill, and Joe summons Badger's wife, who practices folk medicine, to tend him. Badger comes along and is furious when Gray arrives with his wife, so Joe can sign the final papers for the sale of the homestead. Feeling betrayed by Joe for helping the cattle company to squeeze me, Badger hits Joe, proclaiming, "By God, boy! I thought you'd amount to something." As Gray prepares the papers inside, Joe watches his wife, who, through the warped glass, is visually reminiscent of Joe when she was a woman of society. In an instant, Joe changes her mind and refuses to sell to Gray, who leaves in disgust, issuing less than veiled threats. Tinman recovers, and on election day, Badger and Joe ride to Ruby City but are met by several of Gray's masked gunmen. Badger shoots one of the gunmen, but is wounded, so it is up to Joe to finish the fight. She kills the 2 remaining men, but the pain of the act of killing is clearly indicated on her face. The plot jumps to many years later after Tinman Wong has died. Joe collapses while fetching water, and Badger finds her in bed, near death. He takes her in his wagon to the Ruby City doctor, but she is dead before they arrive. As Badger buys rounds of drinks at the saloon in memory of Little Joe, the Undertaker rushes in with his shocking discovery: Little Joe was a woman. The town elders rush back to the Undertaker's place to inspect. All stand around the preparation table in shock, all except Mrs. Addie, Kathy Haas, the saloon owner, who laughs and laughs. Badger is furious at the betrayal by his friend, and because Joe made a fool out of me, he goes back to her homestead. And as he tears the place apart in anger, comes across the letter from her sister and a picture of her as she lived as a woman. In town, the people tie Joe's dead body to her horse for a photograph. The final shot is of the newspaper story, with the before and after photographs and the headline, "Rancher Joe was a woman." Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss out on interesting movie recaps from our side. Until then, cheers!